Hello, everyone, and welcome to the OMG show for a special segment of Burning the Boats. Today, my guest is Michael Higgins. Michael, how you doing, man? Good morning.
I'm doing great, Oscar. How are you?
Doing all right. I'm in Seattle right now, freezing, but missing that Tampa weather. But other than that, I'm doing good, man.
Well, our low is something like 83, and our high is 92. So
yeah, right now it's 7 in the morning, and so our low is 37 degrees right now.
Oh, jeez.
Which explains the jacket and everything. So, but yeah, man. So first of all, thank you for being on the podcast. I met you about a year ago, and this was kind of like before Masterminds Tampa was even starting. It was kind of just an idea, and you were talking about SEO. And so for me, I had done SEO throughout college, and I kind of stopped for a while just because I wasn't getting results fast enough. So I was like, there has to be a different way to get this done. But you're stuck on the SEO trade, and then you kind of, I'm not sure if what you do now only involves SEO or if you expand into other projects as well. But I would love it if you can kind of give the listener an overview of what it is exactly that you do.
Sure. Yeah. So at a high level, we do websites and applications.
Okay.
And then in that context, we provide websites as a service. And then under websites, we also provide SEO. We provide all the optimization through CDN. We provide Google ads, Facebook ads, all those types of components. The geo-targeting so that you can hit the exact people you want. You can pull the data on them and advertise them separately.
Mm-hmm.
And then applications, we build everything from business apps through healthcare, through video games. And so it's kind of it's a neat area to work in because you never know what the prospect who will turn into a client is going to want.
Yeah.
It could be something completely mundane, like we just made an invoice generator that's through Excel. Super boring, but it pays the bills, so we're happy to do it.
Very cool.
So that's kind of a high level what we do.
Gotcha. So now tell me a little bit about your backstory because it's very interesting. I was reading your bio and it was like, I know you're originally from Jacksonville and you kind of did stints all over Florida, even California, and ended up being in Tampa because of your wife now. And so, talk to me about that journey. Is that something you always knew that you wanted to start doing right off the bat? Because I know you have a background in like history, politics.
Right.
You're a learned man, So
well,
how did that get into it?
So I've always had that entrepreneurial itch. And so I dated my high school sweetheart. We got married. That's all great. And in college, I had this entrepreneurial itch. I had this idea. I said, man, I want to have a laundromat that's going to have a mirrored ceiling. And on the second story, we're going to have a cafe. And you can look down through the glass floor and you can see when your laundry's done. You can roll this out in college towns. And they'll have sandwiches and beer upstairs. And then when the laundry's done, they all leave. Maybe they'll have cards or whatever.
Yeah.
And my girlfriend at the time, now my wife's like, that idea is crazy. You can't do that. It's too expensive. I'm like,
what?
Well, you find out she's right.
Yeah.
It is a crazy idea. I mean, it's a cool idea still to think about it. But I'm glad I didn't get tied down to a specific location. Mm-hmm. And she's right. There's a lot of capital in buying a building and the equipment.
Right.
So, we started out in Jacksonville, high school sweethearts. I went to Ave Maria. I got a degree in history, minor in humanities. All my professors were, either from Princeton or University of Chicago or Cambridge. And they all had, this really, this great drive for making us actually read a book, learn what the author has to say, articulate that, and then be able to articulate why you think it is or is not right. And, we would read between like 3 and 5 books a week. And so by the end of the week and you're writing your essays, you're tired.
Yeah.
And then you go into class, you have to answer all their questions. Well, what that gave me though was the capability to read lots of different types of ideas, stand up for them, and then present them to other people.
Mm-hmm.
In turn, as an entrepreneur, what that has allowed me to do is sit and listen to people, regardless whether I like their idea or not, understand what the strengths and weaknesses are, and tell them, here's where I can help you. And that's a valuable component. So anyways, we graduated right in time to get married and have a kid right as the recession hit.
Okay.
So 2008, it's debatably the worst time to start a family in the last like 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
So that's when we got started. We got pregnant right away, and it was like, holy moly, what are we going to do? So I went from selling insurance where I was making okay money to basically you're only making base salary. It's like, wow, this is awful. So I turned around and I started applying for other jobs, and I had an Excel sheet because, I'm a nerd. And
hey, I'll tell you what,
all these
Excel
places
sheets are great. I still use them all the time. So
they're amazing. I love them more today than I did then.
Yeah.
So I applied to 500 places, and I got either no answer or a no.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Every
did you
single
say 500 places.
500.
What?
I couldn't get hired. Literally, McDonald's, Subway, low end, all the way through, trying to replace the salary.
And this was with a college degree in 2008.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it was awful.
Yeah.
And so those guys were like 33, 34, 35 who listen to this will say, yep, I was there. That was awful. It was no fun. And there's a journey there it was difficult. And so when I meet the guys today who are graduating, they're like, no, I'm going to turn down that $75,000 a year job. I'm like, you're out of your mind. I don't know what you're talking about. Take the job and run.
Yeah, especially now. I mean, crazy, but continue on. I don't want to cut you off.
So I applied to 500 places, either got no or no answer to every single one. And I was like, well, this is pretty awful. And I wrote to my thesis director, and I said, for undergraduate, and I said, look, I've applied to 500 places. I'm in Tampa. Should I just go to graduate school and ride out the recession?
Mm-hmm.
He said, you know what, Michael? Some little Catholic boys' school was looking to hire a theology teacher, or a history teacher. And of course, this is like November. This would be 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay. So if you're from Tampa, the little Catholic boys' school he's talking about is Tampa Jesuit. And it's not some little Catholic boys' school.
It's like a little empire
kind of
there.
A big deal. But of course, I'm from Jacksonville, and I'd never, ever even heard of Jesuit.
Yeah.
And so, long story short, I emailed the president. I have the professor's email below it, and he says, would you be interested in teaching theology? I said, sure, we can do theology. Theology. Look, I went to Catholic school. Yeah. So, well, it would specifically be church history. I said, church history? It's like Western history with just an emphasis on the church. Yes, of course I can teach that. So I literally, between whatever it was, mid-November and January 1st, went from 2 emails back and forth, 2 in-person meetings, and then I was teaching whatever that first week of January was, 2010, at Jesuit High School. Wow. It was a little bit of a culture shock for me.
Yeah. Explain a little bit more about that.
So Jesuit High School is, depending on who you ask, it's in the top 3 best high schools in Tampa Bay. And they draw from the top 25% of students. So they tend to be pretty smart. They also tend to be pretty wealthy. Although they will be the first ones, Jesuit will be the first one to point out that 33% of all their students have a sizable scholarship. Yeah. And that's true. They do a very good job with donating to the community. So I got to come in, and I have this idea that I'm teaching the best of the best. I'm going to go and teach them church history, and we're going to hit the ground running. Well, it turns out the teacher before me basically hadn't taught them at all. And so I come in hard charging, and it didn't work out well. Yeah. It worked out terribly. So I had to learn, that there's an art, there's a dance to teaching in which you provide the materials and you talk about it, and then you can evaluate them. Well, for that first semester, I really had 2 left feet. It was awful. I did a terrible job teaching, and I'm sure the boys, if they find out this video is out there, will go on and say, yes, you did, Mr. Higgins. The first semester, you were awful. But I picked up. I did better after that. They renewed my contract, and I was really grateful for that. And then I taught both history and theology from then on. So I was the only teacher to be in 2 departments. I taught introduction to theology. Actually helped develop that course. I taught church history. I taught scripture. I taught American foreign relations. I taught American history. And it was a great time. Teaching is a lot of fun. Yeah. And they really helped me learn how to teach through that daily trial and error. taking that macro view, what they did is they helped me learn how to give a presentation on the fly. So now if I have 5-8 minutes heads up, hey, you're talking today at whatever networking meeting, I can go in and I can talk about a given subject. No problem.
Because you have the framework in your head, you kind of know how to lay out that story arc to kind of go from, beginning to end.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
And also, if and when a client or a prospect asks a question, midway through a presentation, I guarantee you, Jesuit high school boys have asked a worse question at a worse time.
I can only imagine, man.
Yeah. So, we went through that. It was great. It was a lot of fun. And so we had another 2 kids while we were there. And I said, you know what? With this direction, I will never, ever be able to make enough money teaching. So as much as I love teaching, I need to go do something else.
Yeah.
And so I had gotten a job offer. And I said, you know what? I'll take the job offer. It was going to start me around 75, and there's commission attached. And I said, that'll work. I can do it. And when I got there, I had already turned in my
resignation
decision. Right. My decision. I'm not going to be returning.
Yeah.
I went to accept the job offer, and the sheet of paper he pushed across was for $35,000 a year.
Oh,
I looked at it and I said, whoa, I can't live on that, man. That's less than I'm making now. And I'm a teacher. That's embarrassing. And he said, well, if you want to start here, this is what it starts at. I said, well, what about what we talked about? So pushing beyond, I said, well, I can't accept it. And I left again. I said, well, I'll just apply. I've got 2 degrees now. I've got an undergraduate degree. I have a master's degree. I've got, years teaching at Jesuit high school. The economy is better. I'll be able to get a job. I didn't get a job. And it was all summer. I was like, holy moly, what am I going to do?
Wow.
Because Jesuit's it's a 10-month contract, but you get 12 months of pay. So throughout the summer of 2014, I still had salary coming in. It's no big deal.
Right.
But as the days and weeks ticked by, I said, I got to get a job. And I told my wife, look, at probably mid-July, I said, here's the deal. If I don't get hired by August 1st, I'm going to start my own business. So I would be willing to work 80 hours a week in order to make that happen. But by the time 2014 came around, we've got 3 kids. I'm like, I can't work 80 hours. Well, I could. I would have done it. But I didn't want to work 80 hours a week in order to make a living. I wanted to try and work regular hours, which I kind of define as like, hey, 8 to 4, 8 to 5,
right.
Occasionally work an evening. I didn't really want to work 80 hours a week and not see my kids. That's my goal. I want to be home. I want to be with my kids and run them and, go on bike rides and play soccer. I mean, that's way more interesting to me than going and working another 40 hours a week.
Absolutely.
I don't really want to work 80 hours a week.
I don't think anybody does.
I think people brag about it, and you look at them, you're like, why are you bragging about having to work 80 hours a week? Have you ever divided your salary by hours and seen how much you're making?
Yeah.
It's not fun. Don't do that, man.
Yeah. And I love that you bring that up in terms of like, what does your freedom actually cost you? Right. Because you said that, you could work the 80 hours a week, but it's not worth sacrificing the time with your kids and your family. Right. So I think that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs start to consider very, very early in their careers. It's kind of like, okay, well, this is the kind of life that I want to have. How can I figure that out? Exactly.
And so, I tried a couple things that didn't work at first. So I'm good with tech, just generally speaking. And I said, I know I can fix people's computers. I know I can hook them up with Dropbox or, use some ways that they can have all the information across all their devices. And I learned pretty quickly that it's a bad business plan to fix people's computers because if you fix them, they shouldn't break again.
Right. You're kind of just killing off your lifetime value there.
Right. I had to figure something else out. Yeah, go ahead.
So when you went into like this whole, or you started thinking about tech, did you have tech experience before? Like, did you get that from working at Jesuit or just because, maybe it was a side hobby of yours? Where did that tech background come from?
So both.
Okay.
So my parents always had computers in the house. We started with a like a 386. You know, it has a 5.25 disk, and then we got to be the big shots. We had a 3.5 floppy, and is a 366. It was like, we always had the next cool computer. I was the kid who at the library found out that even though they blocked Internet Explorer, that if you went to File Explorer and you right click and you typed in a URL, you could actually bypass their entire firewall.
Yep.
This is I'm a little kid, and the librarian comes storming over. Who are you? How dare you get on the internet? I'm like, hey, look, you didn't spin your network.
Yeah.
So I mean, I grew up with tech, and then when I was at Jesuit, I was one of the youngest teachers. There were a handful of us as young teachers at that time. When I came in, it was kind of top heavy. There were a lot of older teachers. And so I had spoken with both the president and the principal and said, hey, we really should look at iPads for teaching, because when you look around the nation, this is what's going on. A lot of the textbooks are switching over to digital. And if you look at even the sciences, there's some great applications there. And so with some poking and prodding, they said, all right, we'll give it a whirl. And so they bought a whole bunch of laptops, and they put them on carts, and they bring them in and out. And basically, I helped start the iPad beta program, and I helped evaluate, is this a good idea? And the answer is, well, kind of. I mean, if you put a tablet in front of a teenage boy, some percentage of the time, he'll be doing what he's supposed to be doing. And then some percentage of the time he won't.
Start being distracted.
Kind of like, So basically the question is, do you want to have to fight with the boys over playing with their phone in class and not paying attention to you? Or do you want to fight with them over the iPad, not paying attention to you? Is there a perfect solution to using technology in classroom? Probably not.
Yeah.
If there is, I don't know it. So we went through this whole process, and we tried a lot of different apps for what would be the best, both for teaching and then also for evaluation. And so I made mistakes with like Google Forms of, you've got 5 sections all learning one thing, and they're being evaluated, and they're typing in their answers on Google Forms. Well, initially it sounds like a good idea until you realize they can send all the questions to everybody else who's taking the same test.
Yep.
And you have to, or even better, there's like a check box inside of Google Forms that if you don't check it, it allows the end user to go in and change questions. Whoops. Yeah. I didn't check that. So you can imagine the boys took advantage of this. And what it did in turn was it taught me this is material you have to pay attention to and go through and see what errors you've made so that you can actually secure what you're dealing with. And of course that turned around. It was really useful to me when we turned around with clients. We needed to send out surveys for them, or we needed to use forms for their internal employees. So I feel all these things really helped me in my journey.
Yeah, it sounds like
able to build on it.
Yeah, it sounds like it's every part of your career for the past 10, 11 years has pretty much been a stepping stone to where you are today. You're picking up little bits and pieces where at the time were major setbacks, but now have become kind of the tools that you use to differentiate yourself.
Exactly.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so now, we're at the point where, the laundromat idea wasn't pretty good, but you're thinking about starting a business. And so you thought fixing computers wasn't the right business model. So how did you navigate the waters to, where you are today, essentially?
Oh, I want to put an exclamation mark on, I didn't know what I was going to do. So I named my business Higgins Dynamic Enterprises.
Okay.
Because I had no idea what I was going to do. I was like,
so you're just
going to try something.
Let's just try a web app. We're going to cover all our bases.
Dynamic Enterprises.
Yeah.
And so I call it HD Enterprises for short, because then at least you get the idea of it's looking super, super sharp,
Yeah.
But I really had no idea. So we tried, or I tried, I'm going to go around and fix people's computers. And that was actually where I first started, and I was good at it, and I got recommendations, and I actually got into my longest standing client, who's a CPA, because of that. Okay. And he's in turn shared me around with a lot of people. But I found a giant dead end, and I spent a lot of time there with realtors. So the problem I found with realtors that, of course, because I had no business acumen at all at the time, was realtors either have a lot of money or they have no money at all. And when they have a lot of money, it's immediately before they have no money at all. They're kind of like the desert.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I spent a lot of time there. I actually sat on a board of a realtor networking group and, met with them all the time. I was the go-to guy for anything tech. I got a lot of tiny contracts from them, fixing computers and setting up their small networks and such.
Yeah.
And I realized this is the wrong thing to do. And then they started asking me, hey, Michael, could you run my social media? I said, sure, I can run social media. Why not?
Yeah.
Having no idea about how do you actually run somebody's social media. What does that mean? But the answer is always yes. So I did. And I ran a few different realtors' social media at the same time. And my phone would always buzz, and I'd be, impersonating whatever the realtor was whenever there was a comment. But just a brief note on that, when I would write out all their posts for the month, I would actually have like a different album for each realtor. So you can actually pretend to be that realtor. Because the dirty secret is if you have, in my case, 10 different personal or residential realtors, they don't really offer anything different than each other.
Right.
No, they're all realtors. So you got to like have the different personality and put that on the post.
So you have to develop multiple personalities to a certain extent.
Exactly. It kind of reminded me of like, you're at Jesuit, you start with theology. Hey, we're going to teach love God, love your neighbor. And then the very next period is me, American foreign relations, dominate and rule the world. And then the next period. So like there's this multiple personality you got to go through. Yeah. And I was like, man, this isn't fun. Mm-hmm. I don't know what this is.
It's also
but it's
very
really
stressful.
Tedious.
Yeah,
right.
It's also very stressful because, same thing. I used to do social media management for multiple different clients. And like you said, each one has their own voice, their own messaging, their own style. And, especially like in the fitness world, like there's only so many ways you can do a squat. But the way you present the squat is very depending on where you're coming from. So you can either go like the super aggressive, like just stop complaining, get it done, or the, take your time, it's okay, one step at a time type of thing. And in between those two spectrums, there's just so many different variations that, as the person that's doing the management, you're just kind of like, why am I doing this?
Right. Yeah. Right. And so I said, you know what, this is not a good direction, but I don't have another good direction right now. I'm just going to keep running it. Mm-hmm. And so, I got a little bit better with that. And then the realtors started saying, Michael, could you build a website? And again, my answer is, yeah, I can build a website. So they didn't give me a contract right away. And it was right around this time that the CPA that I had mentioned invited me to come to the West Tampa Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
So I'm a white boy coming from Jacksonville, right? West Tampa Chamber of Commerce is, let's call it 80% Cuban, 15% African-American, and about 2 to 3% white.
Yeah.
I was like the odd man out, I promise you. And I sat down next to a woman whose name is Audrey Perez. Okay. Audrey Perez owns Mr. Empanada. And she said,
okay.
So what do you do? And out comes from my mouth, I build websites.
Automatically.
I never built a website. And she didn't ask. She just said, okay, can you come by next Tuesday? And I need my website taken care of. And I said, sure. So I came by and let me take just one moment and do a caveat. I had a buddy that I knew through Jesuit who's he's an electrical engineer, and he's also a cloud surfer, if you will. So he knew AWS and Azure and Google Cloud. Okay. The guy's amazing. And he's kind of my backup plan.
Amazon Web Services, for anyone who doesn't know.
Oh, right. Pardon me. And so he was kind of my backup plan if I ever ran into anything that was technically difficult. Mm-hmm. So I go and I sit down with Audrey, and she said, well, there's a bad situation with the website, and basically we don't have control of it. And I need it rebuilt so that we have control of it. So without going into kind of the backstory of what was happening, I said,
this sounds very familiar for a lot of people that I worked with that have hired third-party providers.
Correct.
To websites. So
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, anybody who's been down this road before already knows all the backstory that they need
Yep.
to know.
Yeah,
And that
absolutely.
is the backstory. So
Which brings up a
I
very
said,
important point that when you're working on your business, make sure that you're always in control of the assets that pertain to your business. Like, especially when it comes to photography, websites, things like that. Read the bottom print and just make sure that you actually own it. So
right. And just FYI, own your domain. Holy moly.
Yes.
So I said, yeah, we can do that. And she said, well, how much is it going to cost? And of course, my mind is rolling. Like, what do you mean, how much is it going to cost? I don't know. Like, well, I owed $3,000 in bills this month. So I said, send me $3,000. And I had no idea.
Yeah.
And she said, okay. And she wrote the check and passed it over to me. And I looked at her and it's like, I had this moment of like, oh my gosh, she just wrote me a check for the rest of my month's bills.
Mm-hmm.
But now I have to do something I have never, ever, ever done before.
I love it.
And I don't know how to do it. I don't know the first thing about building a website.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went home and I started watching YouTube videos on building with WordPress.
Yes.
And then I started learning about what is CSS and how do you do CSS? Mm-hmm. What does that mean? Mm-hmm. What's HTML? And kind of long story short, I ended up spending like $50 or $60 on a theme and, playing with the theme. And she wanted it to look exactly like her website currently looked. So I had to replicate that. Yeah. And it's her design. It looks like the Mr. Empanada napkin. So mm-hmm. I did it. I did it with some help. I actually had to hire out one piece of CSS to a local developer. And that was my first experience with subcontracting a piece of work. And I didn't learn from it fast enough.
Yeah.
But it was a really good experience where I'm not going to be the guy who can wear all the hats. Mm-hmm. And it probably took me about 18 months to figure out there are only 2 hats that I'm really, really good at. And everything else, I need to sub out.
So let's talk about that real quick.
Yeah.
I think that you bring up a very important point. So in terms of your experience, what are the 2 hats that you actually wear? And what do you think are the hats that you can personally outsource?
So my 2 hats, what I'm actually good at are sales and project management. Mm. So all those sub hats of development, I know enough that I can talk with a developer or a set of developers and say, this is what the client wants. Mm-hmm. And here's the format that they need it back in. And then they'll turn around and they'll say, well, this is what we think will be best to execute on it. And I try to put as much freedom into their hands as possible. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, that's what they are good at. Mm-hmm. And I'm not good at.
So
that's why they're getting
hired. Classic, play to your strengths and then find out your weaknesses, build your weaknesses up with the right people.
Exactly.
Gotcha. And then did you struggle with letting that power go? Or because of that $3,000 pretty much obligation you had to fulfill, you had no other choice but to hire that out? So that kind of, did that embed that mentality into you as far as like, oh, I don't have to do everything? So
it did. So that it forced me to say, I can't do everything. And basically when I worked with my cloud hopper friend, whose name is Emil, mm-hmm. He would take a lot of these technical responsibilities from me and he would just execute on them. And I would call him and we'd talk about whatever the issue was. And he'd always just do it. And he never charged me, which, he was basically starting his own business and he needed some stuff for his portfolio. Mm-hmm. And eventually I started asking too much and we had to talk about it and say, look, either you need to charge me when I ask you to do stuff or I ask you about things.
Yeah.
Or, I need to find somebody else. And so we did both actually, where I actually helped him get a couple, contracts that helped pay his bills and that made things better. And then also I kind of backed off asking him to do things. So that was a personal thing because we were friends and we were colleagues and there was some tension there eventually.
Yeah. You want to keep that relationship intact and not, not ruptured over, business. So. Okay.
Exactly.
All right. So then by the way, what was the timeline on the Mr. Empanada website?
Oh my gosh.
Like,
so I did that early on.
Was it like a 1 month turnaround or,
It was, I don't know. It was probably like a month or 6 weeks. I mean, it was literally me sitting in front of the screen every day for 6-8 hours trying to figure out how do you do that.
And the reason why I bring that up is just because it's a very similar story to mine. Like, I didn't know anything about websites, but I got my first marketing gig saying I knew how to do websites. And same thing, I went on YouTube and learned about WordPress and CSS. But I just want the listener to know that pretty much everything is figure outable.
Right.
It's just like, as long as you have, well, and the interesting thing too, that I think is a huge motivating factor in your story is that the fact that someone paid you $3,000, to cover your bills, and you were like, holy crap, I need to fulfill this, because at that point, that's kind of where this burning the boats kind of segment comes in, because, think about it. If you didn't fulfill, you would have to give the $3,000 back, which you obviously couldn't.
Would have been ridiculously hard.
Yeah. So you literally had no option but to press forward and make it happen.
Right.
Awesome. Okay.
So then once I built her site, though, I was suddenly like really on the inside track at West Tampa because I was brought in by a CPA. I had taken care of Mr. Empanada. And then all of a sudden, it didn't matter that I wasn't from Tampa, that I wasn't a part of the community. I was a part of the community because they trusted me with something and I did it right. And that's for probably 2015 until 2017. It was 70% of all my income.
Wow.
Just taking care of West Tampa. It was incredible. And I took 5 years of Spanish, between high school and college.
Yeah.
I don't know it.
Hola.
It's all gone. It is all gone. But they don't care.
I know. Wow. So pretty much for about 2 years, you supplied all of West Tampa, most of it, 75% of your business is coming from that. Where did the other 25% come from? Was that just referrals from like outside parties, or, where did those come in?
Okay. So this is Tampa specific. I joined a networking group called RGA, which stands for Revenue Generating Activities. And it's where I learned how do you help grow your business? How do you do a one-on-one? How do you learn about what the other guy does? How do you help look out for other people? And in turn, they'll look out for you. And that learning experience was really good. So I spent a lot of time going around networking with them. And so I picked up business from them, and I picked up business from kind of secondary and tertiary contacts that I had who heard I was starting to work in Tampa on tech. And so I get random, contracts. I had no rhyme or reason for anything. It was just like whatever contracts I could get is what I would take.
So it sounds like you were in a survival mindset as far as like, we need the income, so let's just make it happen.
Bingo. Yep. And that's where, when I saw the name Burn the Boats, I was like, yep, I did it. I did it. I know what that is. And so when I heard it, I was thinking, geez, is this more the Cortez, or is this like the ancient Greeks? You show up on the beach and you're like, hey, we're going to fight. We're just going to take it until either we're dead or they're dead.
Yeah.
Somebody's going into the sea.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. So now let me ask you this. Since you were in that survival mode, something that happens with a lot of entrepreneurs, especially if they're service-based, is that, and at the beginning, number one, they don't know how to price themselves. And number two, they take in all this work. But then it gets to a certain point where they realize they can't take more work, or they get burned out by the amount of contracts they take on. Did that happen to you, or were you able to see that before it actually became an issue?
Yeah, so the first problem was pricing. How do you price your work? I mean, so I started out saying, look, it's $75 an hour. And I quickly found out that people are terrified of paying per hour because they basically have to trust you when they can't see you, that you're not going to overcharge them. Because what might take you 1 hour, you could be charging 5 hours for.
Right.
And so a friend of mine, again from Jesuit, I taught his son. So anyways, this friend of mine said, Michael, there are 3 models for pricing. And this is off the cuff, I don't remember for sure, but basically the first one is you can charge by the hour. He said the second one is you can charge by the project. He said, and then the third one is you can charge by, I think it was like percentage of work done for the project. And he said it's like the second option where it's a charge by the project. and then it's plus or minus 20% based upon how much work that you're doing. And so I kind of did that second hybrid model where I'd say, okay, I'm going to charge you by the project, but I'm going to charge you 50% up front, and then a quarter at beta and a quarter at completion.
Okay.
And the reason that that worked out well for me was my first time charging by the project, I didn't charge anything until we were halfway done, and they walked away.
Yep.
I was like, holy cow.
Yeah.
I just put in so much work and I'm not getting anything.
Mm-hmm.
So the trial and error, I feel like I made a lot of the errors.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's necessary. I mean, like we talked about earlier, the stepping stones, right? So yeah, been there, done that. Absolutely. Worked on a project halfway through. I wasn't even halfway. It was like a week before actual completion. The client was just like, yeah, no, never mind. And it was, I was like, wow. All right. Okay. So that pricing model kind of seemed to, put at ease your client. You give them confidence in terms of like, okay, this seems like this guy's legit. I feel confident in his ability to get this done. Let's go ahead and move forward with it.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. In that context, I stayed incentivized because I still want to get that other half.
Yes. So that's a very interesting point that you bring up, because when it comes to pricing models, especially for service-based businesses, I love when the pricing model has an incentive embedded into it. So like, for example, if I do done for you sales funnels, charging a percentage of profit always seems to work really well in terms of getting clients, because they see it as, now I'm their salesperson, and the more sales I make, they're happy with me getting a cut off of that, right? So it's also
right.
You, it's like, okay, well, here's the base project, but rather than paying by hour where you have the opportunity to overcharge me, you're incentivized to complete the project, because that's your big carrot, right?
Right.
Okay, very nice. So once you kind of figured that out, was it easier for you to get clients and kind of grow the business that way, or did you still, find some roadblocks?
So then my roadblock was, it's taking me too long to build a website. Mm-hmm. And once, kind of like with fixing computers, once you build a website, there's no more money. Mm. I said, how do I solve this? And so it was like,
so you had a lifetime value problem, right?
Right.
Like you only had $3,000, but then that was it. What happens after the fact?
Bingo.
Okay.
So it's like November, December 2017, and I'd gotten up with one of the kids at like 4:00 in the morning. I've got a fire going because it was randomly cold, and and I'm sitting there and I'm so tired. I'm like, how do I make this work? How do I make enough money every month and not just, 8 months a year, and then you're trying to pay back bills? How do you make it all? How do you make it all work? And I was thinking about it and like dozing in and out, and then I thought, crap, I gotta pay for Microsoft 365. And like this light bulb went off, like, Michael, you've been sitting on the answer for years. You've been paying for Microsoft 365 for years. The answer is software as a service for websites. It's website as a service. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, well, what are my deliverables? How do I make it so I can actually make money on this? And how much is a client willing to pay? Mm. So I came up with a 3-tiered structure with different deliverables, different price points. Mm-hmm. I said, I think I can sell that. And It was right at that time that I was actually delivering a flagship website. It's called Cheval GAC. It's a big neighborhood up by North Tampa.
Okay.
And I explained it to the owner. His name is Larry King Jr., whose father is actually Larry King.
Really?
Yeah, really.
Whoa.
Yeah. And
That's awesome.
I explained the idea to him, and he said, Michael, the idea is brilliant. You should do it. I said, well, we've already signed our contract. This website's built as a product. It's totally yours. And he said, well, it's a brilliant idea. You should market it. You should really go with that. I said, okay, let's give it a whirl. Mm-hmm. And so I had joined another networking group. I dropped RGA. I joined a new networking group, which interestingly has no digital footprint, and it's all the better for it.
Yeah, that's I could see that happening. More relationship based, more kind of like, we don't talk about Fight Club.
Exactly. And then you end up having like high quality professionals showing up, and
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
not like, hey, let's learn the latest chant and whatever.
That's awesome. I love that. Okay.
So I started talking to them about this idea, and people say, that's a cool idea.
Mhm.
Because at a really simple level, it's, I'm not only going to design and develop your website, I'm going to take care of all your problems on the back end.
Right.
And
And
so
that's
the
only
business owner hears, I don't have any website problems.
absolutely.
And coming back to my education in philosophy, what am I really selling is I'm selling happiness. That's what
Mm,
anybody who sells well sells.
yeah.
You have a problem that makes you sad. I'm going to sell you happiness.
There you go. Say that 5 times
Yours is
fast.
sales funnels. So I rolled it out. It sold well. And I was like, wow, this is like having an annuity. This is so cool.
There you
And
go.
over time, Cheval ended up becoming a website as a service client because it was better for them to have me take care of all their issues on the back end instead of having an in-house guy do it. So that actually worked out nicely there too.
There you go. I mean, you were giving them happiness, so why would they say no?
Bingo.
Very cool. Okay. And so let's take it back. Let's rewind again. You said that you kind of woke up at 4 a.m. to start a fire, right? And you were
Yeah.
sitting there thinking the thought in terms of like, like, how can I make more money? Where
Right.
did that want and that need of more money come from? Were you spending, we talked about how you wanted to spend more time with your family at that point in your life when you were thinking that 4 a.m. thought, were you not spending enough time with your family, or was it a different motivation behind that? How do we get more money?
Right. Yeah. So the issue then was I had the time with the family,
Mm-hmm.
but I wasn't making enough money on a regular basis. So
Mm-hmm.
I would go like a month and I'd make, no money or low money, a few $100, $1,000. And then a month later, I make a bunch of money and I have to pay back the prior month's bills.
Mm-hmm.
And that's painful. Nobody wants to do that.
Yep.
And so that was my pain point was we're coming up on Christmas. I got to pay a bunch of Christmas bills, as every dad knows.
Yeah.
And I've got a sleeping child in my arm. I'm not getting enough sleep.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the motivation. I had to make more money.
Gotcha. So you pretty much had the time, but you didn't have the stability that you want as far as
Bingo.
that security. Got it. And I think that's
Right.
a very important point to bring up because, for a lot of people, it's like that for a very long time. until
Right.
something happens and it clicks and they're like, oh, you know what? I probably should get smart about this. So sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay, great. So now that we have this 3-tier structure, is that currently what you're doing now, or has that evolved even further?
Okay, so that's the core of my business.
Okay.
And it is my long-term goal. I
Got it.
want to have website as a service, going forward, unless there's some major technology change. We don't use websites anymore. And then I want to use whatever that new doohickey is. We're going to offer that as a service.
Okay. All right. So let me ask you this, because now like in the world of like, are most of your clients local or digital or a mixture of both?
Okay, so let's say probably 80-85% are local, like 90-minute drive from where I live.
Mm-hmm.
But I do have, clients out on the West Coast. I got them up in DC and then New York. Basically nothing in the middle of the country.
Gotcha.
So
okay.
Pacific and Atlantic, but no Mississippi.
All right. Now, when it comes to, for example, like online marketing, what's your take on having like not even a website, just having a sales funnel? Have your clients been asking you about things like that, and what's your take on it?
So actually, I'd put that right back on you.
Uh-huh.
Tell me, how would you actually develop a sales funnel? Because the vast majority of my clients really just need informational type websites or a members only type website.
Mm-hmm.
I have a limited set who actually have e-commerce, and of them, they have a dedicated client base who just love buying their stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, most of the people that I work with, most of my clients are service-based businesses. They actually don't do any e-commerce. So for me, I think having a website is paramount in order to have that. But in terms of developing a sales funnel, for example, like there's tools like ClickFunnels that advertise, you're only one funnel away, which to a certain extent is true. But for me, it's more important about the strategy. And when you're a service-based business, there's different points of entry for your market to do business with you. And when your website is really fine-tuned with the messaging, it's literally like an automated sales person. So for me, it's strategy first, and then we mold the website around the strategy, and then we build the funnels around that.
Yep. So you're in a different area of websites than I am.
Yeah.
And that's something I'd be happy to collaborate on.
Gotcha.
But it's not my area of expertise.
Gotcha. Okay. So
actually, this is a perfect example.
Yeah.
I don't do that. I would literally, if somebody came up and said, Michael, I need a sales funnel website, I'd be like, hey, Oscar.
Yeah.
You want to work with me on a job? You'd be like, hey, Michael, I love getting work.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. Okay, great. So that brings up another point, because it sounds like one of the biggest like catalysts in terms of you being where you are today is your networking capability.
Yes.
Like you were part of RGA, now you're part of the secret society, you know.
Right. Okay. So yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I do, I belong to the Temple Terrace Chamber of Commerce, the West Tampa Chamber of Commerce, and West Shore Alliance as far as like general networking goes.
Yeah.
And Temple Terrace and West Tampa are more similar to each other. They're very specific areas. They tend to be small businesses. Everybody knows everybody. It's a very tight-knit community. And they both take time to break into. The West Shore Alliance is a little bit different. They have everything from small businesses like I am, all the way through, very large corporations, national corporations that belong to it. And so it allows you to go in and have FaceTime with decision makers at a very wide variety of levels.
Nice. Okay. So it sounds like anyone who's listening should probably get involved with a chamber of commerce locally, because like you said, you were speaking to, can't recall her name, but the lady who owns Mr. Empanada, and you said it just rolled off the tongue, I do websites. Right. From that, boom, it became a catalyst for everything that you're doing now. Right?
Exactly. Yes.
Got it. Okay. So looking back over, past years, what would you say are kind of like the three biggest lessons that you've learned as far as, continuing to do what you want to do?
One, make a decision and execute on it. Just what are you going to do? Create whatever your main tasks are and subtasks, and then just do it. And it's my incentive there was I don't get paid unless I actually execute on any of this.
Gotcha.
Has to be. Two, I can close deals face to face, but I'm not very good at closing over the phone. So I have to do a lot of external networking in order to create relationships. But as I create those relationships, I will bring in business. And under that, I'll create two subheadings, because there are two types of relationships that I'm looking for when I have those face-to-face meetings. One is with prospects, and a prospect can turn into a client. And that's great, because even if they turn into a website as a service client, it's awesome. That's what you want.
Yeah.
The second type, though, is somebody who could actually be a pipeline for you, and it can send you many clients. And that is probably one of the most important parts in the last 5 years for me. Learning that I have pipeline people out there who could send me business, it's paramount. And I strongly suggest it for all your listeners. Find out who's that pipeline type business and communicate with them and incentivize them to send you business. So for me, it's managed services providers.
Okay.
So MSPs take care of small to medium-sized businesses, networks, and workstations. And they're also going to be the point man anytime the business owner has a tech problem.
Yep. So
they might say, my website's down. I don't know any MSPs inside of Tampa Bay that actually offer websites. And so when I tell the MSP, hey, look, I offer website as a service, they say, holy cow, what a great idea.
Yeah.
Let's talk.
Boom. There you go.
And then internally, I just make sure that I don't discharge any client refer to me from an MSP to another MSP, right? So you got to make sure that they maintain their internal relationships.
That way, no muddy waters.
Exactly. So I keep track of that in my CRM to make sure that it's all kept very clean there.
Very nice. Very nice.
So execute
Mm-hmm.
face to face. Oh, uh, uh, simple math. Simple math works like this: an annuity. An annuity. You want to have X number of dollars
Mm-hmm.
every month. How do you get there? And so you can work from, let's how much I want to make in a year, and then I can divide it out by 12, or I need to get this many contracts to get to that dollar amount. But
Gotcha.
the idea of simple math, something you can just write on the back of an envelope, I think is much more valuable than trying to work out a complex equation that's going to drive tons of money over a short period of time. I have a hard time believing it's going to happen. I've
Yeah.
seen a lot of interesting ideas that don't deliver money.
Yeah,
I like to
no.
keep it simple.
So that being said, because that brings up an interesting thing, and I love the 3 lessons, as far as, making decisions, right? Like, stop thinking about it, just take action, learn through the punches, right?
Right.
2, face-to-face sales. And 3, as far as making it simple, math-wise, what is your take when it comes to like shiny object syndrome? Because this is another important part of like staying committed, right, to your business plan, to your simple math plan. Like, how much you need to make and what you need to do to make that. So when it comes to like, are you affected by shiny object syndrome at all in your business in terms of, oh, how can I get this faster, quicker, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes. So during that period, 2015 to 2017, one of those prospects that I thought was a client that we did all that work for,
Yeah.
that was a shiny object. It was a
Ah,
telemedicine company startup. And basically they offered me the position to run everything as CTO. And I
gotcha.
said, wow, that sounds awesome. And so I went through months of different investigation, talking to different teams. And I'll just go right to the punchline.
Mm-hmm.
This guy, whose name is Stuart. All right, so Stuart calls his friend, who is a head honcho at Adobe, and says, hi, head honcho, whose name I don't remember.
Gotcha.
Hey, I need $3 million to start this business. Here's how it'll work. And the head honcho says, sure, you were best man at my wedding 20 years ago. Of course I'll give you $3 million.
Wow.
My only caveat is I'm going to supply the management team for your project, and I'll pay for them separately from the $3 million.
Mm-hmm.
And Stuart said no. And
Wow.
I looked at him and I looked at the phone and I said, I can't work for somebody who won't accept money. There were no strings attached. There was no capital. There was no like, hey, I need to own 50% of your business. It was just, I'm going to send you a management team.
Yeah. He was
said,
giving
wow,
them assets. He was providing assets.
Right.
No.
I'm not only going to give you the money, I'm going to give you whoever he said is a world-class management team.
Wow.
Yeah. No, you say yes.
Yes.
So I was distracted by a guy who offered the world because, if you run a company that can provide telemedicine in 2015, there was a huge potential for making money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I learned the simple math piece of no. Let's not get distracted by that. Come back to the basics, make it work.
I love that you bring that up because it's kind of like everyone talks about it, like specifically like the Gary V's about like the unicorns, right? Where it's like, they grind, all of a sudden, boom, they shoot up and now they're like $1 billion valuation company. And it's kind of like, it'd be nice to have that, but at the same time, it's also nice to, like you said, have an annuity.
Right.
Slow and low is the way to go type of thing. It's like, hey, look, just, what number you need to hit, figure out what you need to hit that, and then just keep writing that way.
And then work at that.
Yeah. Just work at that. It's, what's your take on, for example, like when it comes to scaling your business, right? Are you more of the opinion of like finding out what works and doubling down on that strategy, or figuring out where there's potential outliers and then focusing on that?
So I'm not sure which direction you want me to answer this.
Mm-hmm.
In a very basic sense, I've not found any specific verticals that my business works for better than others, other than I tend to do really well with information type websites or members only type websites. We're good at e-commerce, but usually with a dedicated client base.
Right.
But as far as pursuing outliers,
Like, for example, would it be better for you, like you said, membership sites work really well. So to double down going after businesses that have or have a need for membership sites versus websites that have a need, for example, like Shopify or something like that.
Okay. So on that, what I would say is, generally speaking, if somebody has a Shopify website, they probably already have a website designer.
Mm-hmm.
It's harder for me to break in.
Okay.
Whereas if they have an information type website or a membership type website,
Mm-hmm.
there's a decent chance they set it up,
Mm-hmm.
or that the guy they set it up with doesn't have a website as a service model. And so
Gotcha.
it's easier for me to break in.
Okay. All right. So it's easier for you to kind of, like, water takes the path of least resistance, right? So it sounds like,
right,
by following that path in terms of membership sites, that would help you and benefit you. Right?
Exactly.
Okay. All right. So let's focus on membership sites really quick. Now, you do all the tech for the membership sites, correct?
I do all the tech for it? What do you mean?
Set them up as far as...
Oh, no. Here's where the beauty of my model is. I do the sale, and then somebody else builds it out for me.
Got you. See, so that's what I wanted to get to, as far as people understanding that you're...
Okay. Yeah. This is how
going back
my
to
answer. How to scale.
Yeah.
How to scale is spend your time doing what you know how to do well, and have other people do the parts you don't know how to do well.
Mm-hmm.
So my job is literally go to networking meetings, meet people, create a tickler system. So I'm following up with them based on what they have actually told me they want at the timeline that they want, and closing deals. And then when I close the deal, somebody else builds it and I project manage it. I make sure that it's executed properly and on time. Oh, and by the way, anytime a developer tells you, hey, it's going to take me X to build this, multiply it by 2.25. It'll make your life so much easier. Case in point, we have something that my developer said, hey, this will be done by July 1st.
Yeah, multiply. It's kind of like anything else where you're hiring a contractor, right? Like when you're building a house or anything like that, you always, whatever, like you said, I like that number. I always say multiply by 2. But 2.5 is probably a whole heck of a lot accurate. So,
right. And then all the pressure is off you, because when your client calls, they're under the 2.25 timeline.
Yeah.
They don't know that you're upset with the developer for not developing things quickly enough.
Yeah.
There's no pressure for them.
So it's under promise, over deliver.
Exactly.
That's what it is. So if you get it ahead of time, you look like a rock star.
Bingo. Right.
All right, perfect. That's it. Everyone here, you guys heard it. Like that was gold. If you just took anything away from this episode, like just the past 30 seconds is all you really need. It's just focus on your strengths, use people that will strengthen your weaknesses. That's it. Michael Higgins, thank you so much, man. Where can we find you if we want to work with you? Where do we go? How do we get a hold of you?
Yeah, so just drop it in the show notes. My my URL is tbpc.co.
Mm-hmm.
You can find me on LinkedIn. Give me a call, 813-205-6160. Happy to do that. I'd love to sit down and have coffee with you guys anytime. Look me up. Let's go get some cafe con leche.
Hey, there we go.
Let's talk about how we can actually help each other, because it's not just all about this. I genuinely will look out for whatever it is that you're looking for and send you the referrals that I can.
That's right. And look, he's going to bring you happiness, guys. Okay, he's going to bring you happiness. All right.
That's my job.
There we go. Thank you so much, Michael. Everyone listening, thank you for being part of the first Burning the Boats segment. We'll see you here next week for next week's episode. Mike, thank you so much, man.
Awesome. It's my pleasure. Thank you.